In 2023, for a manufacturer to launch a newly developed 3.3 litre straight-six diesel engine kind of goes against convention that we see, especially with so much electrification around. But, well, this is Mazda, and Mazda likes to do things a little bit differently. More specifically, this is the new CX-60 Skyactiv D. It's the diesel version of the company's latest flagship SUV model in Europe, and at least in Ireland, it's going to come with a 254 horsepower straight-six engine with 550 newton meters. In other countries, there will be a slightly lower power 200 horsepower version with 450 newton meters. Now, why is Mazda making a straight-six diesel? Well, first of all, it believes in having what it calls right-size engines. So it thinks having a larger capacity engine, which is designed to be as fuel efficient as possible, better suits a car like this. It already has a plug-in hybrid model. We drove it earlier last year, but, well, it was a little bit lackluster. It wasn't quite there. This actually suits the car a lot better, and we'll get more into that when we go out and driving. In Ireland, we will have 4 different specification grades with this model. You'll have Prime line, Exclusive line, and then the Hamura and Takumi versions. In other markets like the UK, it's probably unlikely to have the Prime line version, but you will have those higher 3 models. It is a pretty good looking SUV. It's certainly very bold, and it is larger than the CX-5. And actually, when you compare them even inside, compared to the CX-5, it is a much bigger step change forward. It is an improved interior. Later on this year, there will also be a CX-80 version, which will be a 3-row model of this car. What that will mean is you'll have a little bit more room in the back seats and a 3rd row. We haven't seen the exact finished product yet, but it's more likely to think of it as a 5+2 rather than a full 7-seat model. But let's have a look inside and see what you get. The interior of the CX-60 is, as I mentioned, a really big step up in both design and quality. Now, the interior look will depend on which specification grade you go for. You can have some models that have this very fine Japanese craftsmanship inside. This is a slightly sportier look inside here. So you've got this kind of very nice soft leather feel across the dashboard. You've got some nice material covering here, and you've got very nice leather seats. The driving position is, first of all, very comfortable. It's a good seat. It's nice and supportive, but you can also set this car up depending on how the car thinks it should be set up. And what I mean by that is you can input your height into this car, and it will then adjust the seats and the steering wheel electrically to the optimum driving position. You can obviously tweak that if you want, but it's a pretty interesting feature. There are some other pretty nifty features inside, including a driver-facing camera system that will detect if you're distracted, for example, or maybe you're drowsy or looking at your phone, and it will alert you to tell you to stop or maybe pull over and have a rest. There is a high quality in here, and, well, this is something Mazda has been steadily improving with over the years. It does have a large, wide center console here. It's bigger than you'd normally see in its other models like the CX-5. You've got a nice double-sided armrest here. That does open out, and inside you've got a little bit of storage, and there's 2 USB-C ports. You can also have a wireless charging pad here, and you get a 12-volt socket too. We do like that there's physical controls for all the climate settings. It means it's much easier to do it on the move, and you've got this large wide screen here in front of you. You can use all the usual Android Auto and Apple CarPlay features as well, and there's a fully digital instrument display. It's nicely laid out, it's very clear and easy to read, and a color head-up display relays all the most important driving information right into your line of sight, including navigation and your current speed. Now, I'm sitting behind my driving position, and I've got a pretty good amount of space. For reference, I'm about 5'9", and even though there's a double screen sunroof in here, I do have a good amount of headroom. I've got an okay amount of space here, and there's a good amount of knee room as well. I don't quite like the fact that it's got bulky seat rails here that my feet are kind of sitting on, but I can stretch my feet out underneath the seat in front, so that's pretty useful. Now, this is obviously better designed for having 2 adults in the back, but you can get a third person on this wide center seat if you need to. If it's not in use, you can pull down a decent armrest as well. On this particular version, the 2 outer seats are also heated. You've got a function here. There's 2 USB-C ports. I've got ventilation and even a 220 volt power socket here. So everyone is going to be nice and comfortable and well taken care of in the back. Being a large SUV also means there's plenty of boot space in the rear. A total of 570 litres, including underfloor storage. The first thing you'll notice when you start driving is the soundtrack. It is unmistakably diesel, but it's got a very deep, boomy, kind of powerful sound to it. It's not all unlike what you would expect from some of BMW's better engines. It's not maybe quite as sweet as that, but it's not a bad motor actually. And with this 254 horsepower version, you also get an all-wheel drive transmission, whereas you only get rear-wheel drive with the 200 horsepower model. Now, that all-wheel drive does give a little bit of extra grip, and around corners and roundabouts, it does stay very level, very sure-footed. It gives you plenty of confidence. There's also a little bit less weight in this version compared to the plug-in hybrid, and when we drove the plug-in hybrid, well, it just felt a bit too heavy, a bit too cumbersome. Now, admittedly, it's only around 130, 140 kilos of a difference, but in a car like this, that makes a heck of a lot of difference. The 8-speed transmission in this particular model is actually pretty sweet as well. It's quick to react, it gets up through the gears, and the gear changes themselves are generally quite smooth. You can use the My Drive system to engage sport. To be honest, having done it, it didn't really change a whole lot other than really putting a bit more red on the graphics in front of you on the instrument display. I think it's fine to leave this car in its normal setting. It's not really dynamically set up to feel all that sporty, although, you know, Mazda does do a few of its clever little tricks to improve the kinematics of the car. This is a very comfortable motorway cruiser. It will do around 1500 RPM most of the time at about 110, 120 kilometers an hour. And at those kind of speeds, it's not using a huge amount of fuel. We saw an average of around 5.8 litres over the course of a day's driving. Now, okay, it's not the lowest fuel economy figure you're ever going to see, but it's not bad in something this size. Not everyone is going to like the soundtrack with this engine. At times it does sound a little bit coarse, but having all that torque on hand is going to be a benefit to people. And this engine can also pull up to 2,500 kilograms, so it's quite useful if you do a bit of towing. But really, it's that surge of torque, which is why you're probably going to want to buy the diesel over the plug-in hybrid. Now, Mazda does also equip this engine with its mild hybrid iStop technology. And what that means is when you're cruising and coasting along, it can, for very short periods, deactivate the engine. It's like most mild hybrids, it's the kind of system that really kind of works less frequently than you might think. Now, while it is quick to shut off and relatively quick to re-engage, that re-engagement itself isn't really all that smooth. It could be a little bit better. Mazda could maybe refine that a little bit more. When the engine is off for those short periods, when it re-engages, especially if you re-engage it by applying a bit more throttle, it can give a little bit of a shudder through the transmission. It's not very bad. I mean, I'm nitpicking here, but it could be a little bit smoother. It's not the best mild hybrid system that I've used. And it's probably really, in the long term, not going to save you a huge amount of fuel. Although in certain cases, Mazda says you can do as much as 40% of a journey with the engine off. Sadly, we didn't experience anything close to that during our time with the car. For a large SUV, the suspension is quite nicely set up. It does a good job of soaking up all the bigger bumps, but it does retain a lot of composure, so it's not going to feel like it's rolling all over the place. But the other thing that really stands out with this car is the build quality. And what I mean by that is driving this even on poorer road surfaces, there isn't so much as a squeak or a rattle from inside this car. And that's really where Mazda has upped its game. And it's perhaps one of the areas where people maybe overlook the brand, but this feels every bit as well made as any premium German marque. Well, driving this new diesel version of the CX-60 does make it a much more interesting and more appealing car to drive. It's a big improvement over the plug-in hybrid. The big thing is whether people are willing to spend their money in 2023 on a new diesel engine when there is so much uncertainty about what the future lies for combustion engines. In isolation, it does work very well. It's got good power, good performance, and it's got a little bit of character to it as well. The big difference is this is probably going to be more expensive in some markets than the plug-in hybrid, and that's another factor that may go against some people's decision. If you want to know more about this car, head over to our website. It's CompleteCar.ie. You'll find it linked in the description below, and it's a great resource for finding your next new car. If you've enjoyed the video this far, please do let us know in the comments below and give it a thumbs up, and why not subscribe to the channel while you're at it. Thanks for watching.